Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue, maybe wrap up, it's hard to say, our retrospective on the Phantasm series with 1994's Phantasm 4 Oblivion, directed by Don Coscarelli. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers
was it
ahead from Denver,
1994?
Colorado. I did not even hear what you said. I'm sorry.
Was it 1994? I could have sworn this came out later in the 90s than that.
Oh my gosh, it is 1998. 1998. I'm not even going to go back and correct that. This is 1998's Phantasm 4. I am so sorry. Directed by Don Coscarelli. From Denver, Colorado, and making mistakes already, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is the redoubtable Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and tech director for Rooster Teeth Studios, makers of Ruby. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online and HorrorMovies.net, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello! And finally, also in Austin, Jamie Barr is a musician, pinup model, educator, and the lead vocalist and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band Danger Cakes. And you can find out about their latest shows and their album Quarter Life Crisis at www.dangercakes.net. Say hello, Jamie.
Hello.
Hello.
Also, as of this week, Austin Music Industry Award nominee.
Oh, well, we've got to add that to your intro. So,
no, don't. Please don't.
Well, congratulations.
I didn't win.
It's an honor just to be nominated.
Yeah, nominee. Yeah. Hey, I'd go with that. Phantasm 4 Oblivion, or Phantasm 4 Ian, is a 1990. I'm serious. It's OBL4ION is a 1998 American horror film written and directed by Don Coscarelli, starring A. Michael Baldwin, Reggie Bannister, and Angus Scrimm. It is the third sequel in the Phantasm film series. Okay, let's get our opening thoughts, and let's do it the way we did the first one. Tony brought us to the Phantasm series, and Tony will bring us out of it. So let's go Tony, Jamie, Drew, and then I'll say whatever is left. Opening thoughts, Phantasm 4.
Yeah. Oh, man. It's kind of a mess of a movie. I remember when I saw it at Phantasm Fest, and it closed out, and then I'd met such great people, and everybody was cool, but I still was kind of like, I have to chew on this one a while. And then, and it was new, so you don't want to be like, oh, why that? And rewatching it, there's a lot of great bits in it, and I like the ideas, and it's kind of cool to see the beginnings of like an origin story for Angus Scrimm, and it is and it isn't. Like, I don't know. I wish I could see more of that, but overall, I don't think it doesn't gel in the same way that other the rest of the series kind of gels, and especially because the previous one they were kind of going like a little bit more straightforward, and this one is kind of all over the place, and with a lot of clips from other movies. So
yeah.
I don't know. It's definitely not my favorite movie. I wish that the good bits were less sparse. Let's say that.
Excellent start, Jamie. Phantasm 4. I'm wondering what you're thinking about this one.
I think this movie sucked. I thought it was terrible. I kept looking at Drew for like this. Wait, what? Like he was going to know something that I didn't, but he didn't either. And a lot of times it just didn't make sense. It didn't follow the same plot line of the first movies, in my opinion. Like the fact that suddenly Jody, the older brother, who's been, kind of like a fallen hero of the other movies is now suddenly a bad guy, and you don't know why. And just things along those lines where there's just a lot of nothing and flashbacks and then more nothing and, flashback. And what happened to the kid from the last one? I liked him. What was it, Timmy?
Yeah,
Tim, yeah. Just
Pretty
gone,
sure, yeah.
no mention. They don't say anything about him the whole time. So it was just, I don't know, this movie kind of, I would like to think that there was a couple good points, but I really don't have any to say. But I got a lot of bad good things to talk about, or I should say bad good things to talk about. So
excellent.
yeah.
No, good bad things too. I think that well, either one of those sounds perfect. All right, Mr. Drew, are you going to break this streak of?
First off, I want to say I have remembered a scene that was not in this movie where the tall man kills Tim and removes a metal sphere from his head, and that's obviously it's not in the movie, so I guess I just trimmed that. But am I going to break this streak? Not exactly. I will say this is the only one of these movies I never bothered to revisit after the first time I watched it. When I saw this movie, it was infuriating to me. I thought this was going to be the movie that finally answered all the insanity of the previous movies. We were going to get an origin of the tall man, or you're going to see an epic showdown, and we got none of that. And at the end of the day, this movie sort of reminded me of one of those sitcom episodes that reuses a bunch of clips from old episodes. This time around, I have to say, maybe it's because I know there's a new Phantasm coming out, and we may finally get some kind of resolution to everything. I was a little bit more forgiving of it. I thought some of the way the unused footage from the previous movies was used is actually kind of clever. The Reggie stuff is actually really entertaining. There just isn't enough of Reggie being Reggie in this. But all the stuff with Mike is dull. It's just dull. And I wish I could say that wasn't the case. But it was more entertaining to me this time around. But I still, at the end of when the movie ends and we don't really get that face-off between Reggie and the tall man, it just pisses me off.
So you mentioned those clip shows, episodes of old sitcoms where the show, people talk and then you watch old footage. I have two thoughts about that. First of all, in my family, we called those writer's strike episodes because the place when they really came to prominence, at least for me, was in the 80s during this massive writer's strike that just slaughtered the networks for a while. And like an entire season of your favorite sitcoms was all clip shows. People would just sit down and go, gosh, it's tough being stuck in this waiting room. I guess we'll talk about all the picnics that we've had through the years. And then they'd go, oh, remember that other picnic? Anyway, so this does have that flavor sometimes, except for, I have to say this is the cleverest use of old footage I've ever seen. Because they not only use old footage from earlier movies, they use unused footage, which apparently Coscarelli shot the hell out of this movie as far as like getting like hours and hours of scenes that were deleted and extra stuff. And all of that old footage looks gorgeous. So to that extent, it's a very cool, I don't know, it's a very cool experiment in playing with the continuity of a long-running series and showing the same actors earlier. All that's very clever. That's like the best stuff in here. The movie itself feels like a filler episode. Like it's almost like Coscarelli is making something in the spirit of a TV series where you know that you've got to kill some time before the finale, except for it's not. It's a movie series, and there's like 6 to 8 years in between each one, so it doesn't make any sense that it would be just like taking its time in the way that it is. But it does have that feel. Finally, I like how this series has continuity that it takes really seriously. I mean, it's very neat that it keeps trying to loop it all together, even if, as Jamie says, it's constantly cheating at that. But it has better continuity than Evil Dead. I mean, hands down. And it
Really?
really tries. I think so.
No.
How does Evil Dead 2 wrap around with Evil Dead 1? It's very difficult. Evil Dead 2 to me looks like...
Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell have said it. Ash is dumb, and he just went back to the same cabin. I mean, that's all you really need.
I'll buy it. That's okay. Fine, it's fine. But anyway, I'm just saying that this movie makes more of an attempt at continuity. It probably has to, and that's kind of cool. I mean, so there's cool things about it, but it is draggy as hell. And I like draggy movies. That's why I like Let's Scare Jessica to Death, and Drew doesn't. But this one dragged. So those are my thoughts. I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't go on too long with my opening thoughts, but I just was like, blah. I was thinking about all that. Let's get started. This movie opens, as always, with a recap of everything else. It spends, I want to say, like 10 minutes going through where we've gone before, setting up where all the characters are. Which is
my wayward son. Sorry.
Yes. Exactly. Well, except for it doesn't have the characters together. You're thinking of Supernatural, and like I said, I think that Supernatural is basically Phantasm with angels. But this movie kills that because that's true of the last two films, but it's not true of this one where the characters are separated, which is also like a bridge episode in a long-running series. It's the episode where the characters are generally apart most of the time, but. And where Drew? Do you want to explain like where we find our heroes, like what Mike is doing and what Reggie is doing? And by the way, if you know what Tim is doing, you can let us know.
Well, in my imagined scene, there was a dummy of Tim, a Tim dummy that got killed by the tall man, snapped his neck, and then proceeded to bore a metal ball out of his head, and that was the ball that he menaced Reggie with,
right.
which would have been wonderfully twisted, but it's not actually in the movie. Although in my head canon, I'm going to say that's what happened, unless of course they bring Tim back as an adult in the very next movie.
These guys forget nothing. They could bring Tim back.
Yeah.
There's no problem.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
We find Reggie exactly where we left him, surrounded by...
Yeah, he's covered in the flying balls of death, and the tall man basically tells him that he basically tells him that he's not he more or less lets Reggie go because he's like you're not worth my time, ice cream man. And while this is going on, Mike is driving atmospherically out of a cemetery in a hearse and monologuing in his head about how he has to be separate from everybody else and figure everything out. Eventually, he's on the road, and the tall man comes out of the coffin in the hearse and tells him that he's got a great or terrible destiny ahead of him. That's about as much sense as I can make out of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Tony, are they setting it up so that what is going on here is the tall man saying to Mike, "You're supposed to serve me, join me, and together we can rule the galaxy." What is?
Well,
why is this?
That's
happening?
why it gets. I watched this twice, and I still am like, this will be the third time I've seen this movie. So there's a thing where they've met before in the past.
Yeah.
And then there's also some predestiny thing where the tall man's like, oh, well, you got to be with me, and you're also, by the way, you're also a sphere. There's one in your head. So your brain's in a sphere in your own head. You should come back to me because for some reason you're really special.
Or he has two brains. He has a sphere and a brain.
Yeah.
Can you?
You're special for. Am I wrong? Like, is there Is there?
It seems like
that
he's like insinuating that he might be the replacement Tall Man because
no,
there's
that's kind of what
too.
I get. Like he's destined to become a whatever the Tall Man is, but he's also had the weird time travel thing, and that's part of why he's destined to be that. But neither of them really gels. He's also I also on the comedy portion when the Tall Man takes over the hearse and just starts going, oh, okay. In my head, I play Tall Man Take the Wheel.
I have to say, I love the fact that he says the coach. He refers to it as the coach. It's so wonderfully old world.
So Tall Man takes the wheel and just drives. And then there's also the thing where he's able to summon the time tuner things, and he can summon multiple ones of them. Man, it's just...
By time tuner, you're talking about the teleportation poles.
Yeah, I didn't even take it as he was summoning them. I thought they were just like automatically showing up. Like,
well, he said something about summon. If I'm not mistaken, he said something about summoning. Like, there's a line somewhere in there about that. But he summons more of them, and then
and this is a point before he starts. I mean, it's after all of this conversation that Mike is going to start what he does through most of the movie, which is, in theory, investigating the origins of the Tall Man. But, do you think, Jamie, here's a guess. Nobody knows the answer to this, so go ahead and guess. How long has Michael had that sphere in his head? In other words, did Michael... so one theory would be that Michael literally, even from the very beginning, he's been a plant of the Tall Man that has amnesia, essentially, forever.
Yes, but I think if everything ties back to Morningside, so, the Tall Man was part of Morningside a long time ago, so they met in the past due to the weird time stuff, which they introduced here. But if I were to make an educated guess, I would say that it was decided that Michael was the chosen one at around the same time the Tall Man makes it to Morningside proper and is starting to do his dirty deeds in the first
stuff that we saw in movie
in the
one,
first
or
film.
Stuff in the first film. And the origin that we get here of the Tall Man, and we should talk about it here so that we can keep referring back to it. What they make clear after Michael discovers a way to go into the past, he learns that the Tall Man is, okay, tell me if I've got this wrong, but the creature that we know as the Tall Man is really an entity that is inhabiting a form that is essentially patterned after a brilliant scientist who was also an undertaker back in the 19th century. In other words, that guy discovered a path into Tall Man's dimension, and Tall Man more or less right away, well, who knows how long it took in that dimension, but more or less right away took that guy's form and walked back out into our world to start all of his bad stuff. Is that right? In other words, this isn't really Twisted Jebediah Morningside. This is an extra dimensional,
or he's
Jebediah
possessed,
ceased to exist, because they even say Jebediah never came back.
Right.
Like he went through.
Well, and they go to the other dimension, and Jebediah is in there.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I believe you. I just don't remember finding the other.
He goes it and he says, "You're him," and he's like, "No, I'm Jebediah Morningside." And I guess that could have been the past, but again, this movie's really confusing. Jamie, what was your interpretation? I want to know, because she's.
I thought it with the whole I didn't understand why it was even there, to be honest with you. I was like, why the hell did it even matter? Because he goes back into this time warp. He sees everything that's going on, and his little steampunk with all the gears, this little thing he's got going on. And then he realizes, like, okay, I gotta go back now, and then he thinks that he can kill him and save the world by stopping Jebediah Morningstar, but he can't even he's not really even interacting with him.
Yeah.
So I just feel like that whole the whole thing seems so pointless to me. It's like, all right, so you were supposed to realize that you're supposed to think, like, oh, the tall man was really, this guy at one point. But then they say, no, it's not him anymore. Like, it's not actually him. So, yeah, I mean, I would say it's like, maybe a shell or like a clone of something that, like, they cloned the Jebediah Morningstar, but it's not actually him. Morningside, not Morningstar. Although Morningstar might actually be a little more appropriate.
Yeah.
But it's a preferred. I like the idea of Morningstar because that's Lucifer. Right? But,
yeah.
But I think it's a pattern because we see now in this movie we see it more clearly than ever before that whenever Tall Man gets blown up, if there's a portal nearby, he just somehow his consciousness races back to his dimension.
Well, because his consciousness is housed in a golden sphere.
Right. Of course. The sphere goes, boom, and he comes back out in another fresh Tall Man body. That, by the way, like Jodie, also has, for the sake of the viewer, an aging program that causes him to be incrementally older looking every time you see him, which is very clever of the aliens. Because Jodie, who is the brother who is a sphere now and keeps showing up, and I know this is bullshit. I know the actor is getting older, but I'm doing the best I can to explain how this works.
Well, they call this a fan wank.
Okay, is that what it is?
Yeah, when you justify something that they don't bother justifying in the movie, like for example, when they did the last Terminator, they came up with a convoluted reason as to why the Terminator would look older.
Yeah.
So. But you essentially, they never did that sort of thing in this, so you have to come up with your own explanation as to why Jodie, who is this undead sphere ghost thing, would be looking. And I gotta say, he's aged a lot more than Reggie or Michael Baldwin in the years between Phantasm 3 and this. Like, he's looking quite a bit older.
Aging, I mean, two things. One, it really catches up to you at a certain age. And two, weight will do everything. Weight makes a huge, huge difference. If this guy were, if Jodie were 30 pounds lighter, you may not notice as much. And his hair is greatly receding, whereas Reggie looks almost exactly the same physically. In other words, the size of him is the same, and he's just as bald as he ever was. So basically, you almost don't even notice that he's aged over the span of the 20 years. I mean, this thing is going on for 20 years. I mean, I think
Reggie kind of got it Phantasm 2, and he was like, I'm not getting any older.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So, and Michael, it's kind of delightful that the boy who was the boy is now 20 years older. He has wrinkles on his face. He's really, really trim. I mean, he's very, very skinny.
Almost gaunt in this one.
Yeah, he's quite gaunt. But it's just so cool to see this same actor. It's just very rare that we get to see the same person walking around and playing the same role for 20 years. That just doesn't happen a lot. But yeah, well, I mean, and for that matter, Angus Scrimm doing the same thing. But anyway, to get back to the
I don't really notice as much as with Angus Scrimm because he was old to begin with.
Well, yeah, but he had black hair for one thing.
I feel like they just keep changing his makeup. In my opinion, that's the one thing I don't like about this. Was like I felt like he actually looked youthful in this one compared to some of the other ones. Like he was very peachy looking, and actually, in a way, I was like, oh, he looks good. And then it kind of reminded me of when you see a dead body in a coffin, like when they've put makeup on them and it's like a shade too dark because they're trying to make someone look darker. And I was like, oh, maybe they're going for that look, that like recently embalmed look. But I don't think that really the case.
Well,
I think they also filmed them a lot more during the day than they did, and a lot more outdoors than they did in any of the other ones.
Well, that's something that's going on in this movie is that, for instance, a lot of the conversations are happening. Well, first of all, big conversations happen right in L.A., like right near the, just on an empty street, but it's a street with a bunch of storefronts, and it's like at probably 5 o'clock in the morning, or 5:30. Early enough, late enough to have the sun up, but early enough that there's nobody around, and they're just filming on the street because that's cheap, or they're filming standing around in the desert because that's pretty cheap. There's very few sets to get into and be in on natural lighting on this thing. There's a hotel set, there's a mausoleum briefly. That's it. There's not a lot of sets here. I'm trying to think if there's another.
Well, they didn't have as much money on this one, and I think it shows.
There's the Victorian house that the tall man comes to initially. So there's that. That's a third set, and that's a real house. And I guarantee you, when they're filming inside of it,
it's supposed to be the mortuary from the first movie.
Right. Which it doesn't look like that, but it does. It's fine. So basically, there's really like 3 sets. This movie was shot for $650,000. You'd have to ask somebody who's a production manager, like what exactly that works out to and how much you could get away with. $650,000 in 1998 dollars, But it works out that basically that's why they have to spend a lot of time just shooting outdoors. So
that's
anyway,
one of the things I have to say. I'm a fan of low budget movies. But the first one is none of these are super high budget, but the first one's a fairly low budget movie, but it's clever. They make the most of the money that they have. This one doesn't really have that going for it. They kind of try to bring back some of the dreaminess of the original, but I don't think it's
it's less like a dream, It's less like a dream where you're like, whoa, that was a trippy dream, and more like a fever dream where you faded in and out of consciousness, and you're like, it's one of those where if you tell people the next day, they're like, dude, what did you eat the night before? It's one of those, and then I was in the grocery store, and then I immediately pushed a shopping cart out and drove around in my Camaro. I don't even own a Camaro, and Uncle Dan was there, and then a dog ran across, but it was pink. And it just it feels like one of those dreams, and not the cohesive dreaminess of we've talked about maybe some Giallo films, and that's kind of what
Suspiria pops into my mind.
It doesn't have that, which I think the first one has. This has just and here's things going on.
That's a bad kind of dreamy. That's when that word oniric becomes just bullshit. People go, it's very dreamy, and that's used as an excuse to say that the movie doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well,
Suspiria does it well. Go ahead.
I talked about it with the last one, where they were trying to employ both the what the fuckness of the first one and the what the hellness of the second one.
Yep.
This one, their uses of what the fuckness don't work, but the what the hellness, and I'm totally utilizing my own annoying slang.
I think it's great. I think. Just to explain, what the hell means, we may as well go ahead and do this.
The best example of what the hellness in this movie is spear boobs.
Yeah. Okay,
everything can be summed up when I'm trying to explain to somebody when I say what the hellness.
Yeah.
That's what this is. It's just something like this was an idea that was thrown out there. It's completely batshit crazy. No one in their right mind should actually try to put that on film. And they're like, oh, what the hell? Let's just go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas what the fuck is, I don't understand what's going on.
I don't understand what's going on. And sometimes what the fuck can work. It works a lot in the first Phantasm. It works a little bit in the third Phantasm. It doesn't work at all in this.
Right. Well, like I said, I think it works in Suspiria, and I think it works in I mentioned Let's Scare Jessica to Death, stuff that might be
another Coscarelli film, we did John Dies at the end. It has a lot of what the fuckness in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you're like, what is the true narrative? What part was right? What part was didn't actually happen? To be honest with you, this is less of one of those ones where you're not sure if something actually happened, and more like you get the impression that you're missing key parts of the story. Like it's just sort of jumping around. Reggie's story is really just kind of killing time, because what goes on with Reggie,
and yet that's the most entertaining stuff in the movie.
Absolutely, because all Mike is doing is wandering the desert
and sitting in
not even wandering. So he's going to the desert. He's sitting in a hearse writing his suicide note. He's in his suicide. He hangs himself, but then he trades with Angus Scrimm. But then he also is then let down from hanging by a tall man.
I will say this though, purely aesthetically, but the shot of him hanging himself in the desert, and then the shot, like the far off shot of just a tall man standing there. Still images. Great. Those are gorgeous.
Well, Coscarelli's a very good composer. I mean, he makes beautiful images for sure.
That's the thing is, there's bits like I think originally I did kind of write it off where I was just kind of disappointed, and then watching it again, I mean, I don't remember a lot of it. It's just because it doesn't stick with you in the way it's constructed. But the parts that do stick with you, like, there's some really well-framed, cool shots. And I think that's maybe, that's why it's galling when it isn't as good, is because, like, I like Coscarelli a lot, and I like all these characters, and I like this series a lot. And I think there's, I love Bubba Hotep. I like this director, and I like these people. And when it doesn't gel, I think it's worse.
Even really amazing directors make a dud or two.
No, but I don't want it to be in Phantasm. This is still making for an interesting conversation. So, like, it's if nothing else, and it's the other three are just too good when you stack them up against. I think that's the other thing. Like, when you watch these back to back, this one really, really just pales in comparison to the other three.
Oh, well, like I said, I feel like it's a placeholder. Like he knows that next week there's going to be another one, and it's going to wrap up some of the stuff that he's introducing here. Because he doesn't really introduce much here that he didn't already introduce in the last one. To be honest with you,
except as Jamie was saying, Jody for some reason is now evil.
Yeah, and you don't know why, and it's just.
Or is he sort of?
Reggie's pissed at him. Like, he suddenly just. It's just like, what are you doing here? He just was like.
It was more like. I thought he was like the Phantom Stranger. I mean, he's answering to a higher plane and destiny and
except that he helps the tall man. He helps him hold Mike down and drill a hole in his head.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. No,
that's
you're
pretty.
Right.
I'm just saying that's pretty evil, man.
But the funny thing is, I completely forgot that. Every other reading I had through the whole movie, he appeared to be coming across as, again, like the Spectre or something. One of those characters who's like losing it. By the way, another character who ages every time you get back to him, even though there's no reason to, when you think about it, is in American Werewolf in London. David, oh God, now I can't remember the name of the friend who died, but every time you return to him, he has fallen apart.
Rotted. He's rotted.
Yeah. And so here, Jody's not rotting, but every time you get back to him, he's aging. I have no idea why, other than it's kind of cool, I guess, if you imagine it was a special effect and not the interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Except that special effect is actually just the natural aging process.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like him much more in the second movie, because he's sort of just like this guy that's like stuck in like the best years of his life, he looks older, but he's got like the same clothes on more or less from the first movie, and he comes across as like, you see a lot of these like baby boomers that are just kind of like, they're stuck in the 60s or they're stuck in the 70s because that's what their, the best time of their life. And, like, that's what Jody in the second movie kind of has the vibe for. But there's that mournfulness, too, because he's also kind of cursed. Here,
good.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I get what you're saying is he's kind of like the prophet of doom. He shows Mike the sort of desolated world that the tall man wants to bring about. And
okay, wait a second. Let's talk about that for a second, because in fact, you're totally right. But actually, this movie even presents the present world as being, at least as far as I can tell, different from the present world that we're living in, because they're moving up and down the road, and we're told that the towns are devastated. In other words, and we've said before that I really think there's an underlying story from Coscarelli about how the American West is dying out. But the way they play it in this, they're saying that basically it's more Mad Max than even last time. They're saying that town after town after town has been devastated by the tall man. And so in theory, if you got on I don't know if it would be the major, like the freeways, or if you would have to like stick to the old highways, but every town you went to would be dead. And that's huge. I mean, that suggests that the tall man is really sort of wreaking havoc on our world,
But there is still kind of a power structure because there's the police, even though one of them ends up being a zombie.
Yeah.
Yes. God, that's right. Remember, though, there were police in the first Mad Max movie, but I just wanted to mention the zombie police officer. So, yeah, they introduced yet another new monster. Every movie that comes along introduces a new monster. And this one is a demon cop who, can pose as a normal cop, but how did he do the face? Was he just wearing the cop's face, or
he's murdered the other cop, the actual cop? He's the
did he take his face and like rip it off, or was he? I can't remember how he did that.
The guy in the trunk is all like, he looks like he's in a pretzel, like he's like knotted up, and his face is all like mangled.
Yeah, so he must have literally removed his face, but and put the face on, anyway. So that's kind of cool. This is a new creature that we haven't seen before, because we've seen
that's probably the best sequence in the movie is Reggie fighting zombie monster cop.
Reggie's here to have the adventures, basically. Reggie is here to always have a girl in every one of these movies and to get into more action. It's just this movie.
But he never, ever actually hooks up with a girl.
Right.
That's not true. He did hook up in the second one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. You're right. He does actually manage to get laid in the second one. But
we don't know how much time passes between the stuff we're seeing. Maybe he gets lucky, like frequently, and it's just never pertinent to the plot.
And the imagined.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just don't think he's getting ass. In my opinion. No, I don't think so. He's a middle-aged man who's going after women who are like half his age, who are most of the time
he's choosing the wrong targets.
He did have the wife and kids, so there's proof that he did have sex once, and we know at least 1.5 times, because he had that time with Alchemy when she was like molesting his head, but that got cut short as well.
He's got fabulous Thunderbirds called the Solar Sex Panel, and he's emanating it. Jody is well on his way to his own solar sex panel, but it's just not.
I feel bad for Jody.
He is
rougher and rougher in each one. He really does, and I don't think it's just the weight. Like it's just there's something like it's strange that he continues aging. And I know we already touched upon this, but
go crazy.
It's just that he's, it didn't even seem like if he's supposed to have died when he was a teenager or like 20-something, and then you see him the next time around, he's like mid-30s, except he looks like in the second movie, he looks like he's in his 40s already, and now he looks like he's older than Reggie.
No, it's true. And it's because, he was absurdly handsome in the first one, and now he's a very sort of normal-looking middle-aged man.
Well, I will say this. You were also talking about weight. Weight can sometimes have the opposite effect. Like it didn't with him. But like sometimes, a person's face rounding out can actually make them like baby faced and like younger.
More youthful. Yes, Selma Hayek says for every 10 years, it's just they gain 10 pounds.
Huh.
Maybe it's only true in women. I don't know. But I would agree that the weight here does not make him look. It doesn't do him any favor.
It's not helping him. And the fact is, of course, like, look, if they were going to pay him huge amounts of money and they said, listen, man, in 7 months we're going to start filming in the desert, but that means you have 7 months to like lose 30 pounds and I don't know, shave your head or something and
I don't think they had the money to do that though. Like this movie was very low budget, so it's not like they could like hire him.
This movie, like half the budget just seemed like they were wandering around in the Death Valley.
And it's important to know though. It's important to know. We have not brought this up. This movie was made. They were actually planning a bigger budget follow up that never got made. So there really
is a placeholder.
Some of the choices that they made were because they thought that they were going to be able to go back and do another sequel. And this was, you could have felt like set up for something. That's because it was supposed to be set up for something. Unfortunately, it's set up for something that didn't end up happening.
The only thing I think is dumb. There's the only dumb line I can think of, actually two, and Reggie gets both of them. Some cops can be real assholes when the cop, he fights the zombie cop. I just don't buy this stuff.
I laughed at that.
All right. And the other one I will give you is when he goes to bed with the girl who refuses to sleep with him, which she says is because they're working together, which is kind of her. He wakes up in the middle of the night.
She has a lot of baggage, more than just, they're not really working together. She's like, you seem to have a lot of problems, Reggie. You have a lot of issues.
Well, that's right. She says she doesn't sleep with him because it would probably be bad for him, in other words. But regardless, she wakes up. It doesn't matter. She's a plant, and he wakes up in the middle of the night, and her breast has been replaced with giant steel spheres, which is absurd and crazy and wonderful. I mean, this is very clever stuff. But he goes far out, which is just, I don't know. This kind of absurd, like, sideways humor.
But doesn't work. I think it does, because that's the sort of thing somebody of Reggie's generation would say.
Well, they needed to include somehow in this movie.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, she's the only woman, right? She's in
no,
the
you're
movie.
right. There's an exploitation problem. Actually, by wearing the spheres, we avoid actually having real nudity. There's no nipples in this movie.
No nipples.
That is one of the only things I remember about this movie, because as a teenager when this movie came out, that was like my worst nightmare. Lethal boobs.
Oh, I thought you meant a movie with no nipples in it. But,
well, no, there's plenty of other horror movies with nipples in them. But
people, our listeners, I don't think, have any real understanding of what it was like to grow up in an age before the internet. That if you wanted to see naked people, the way that you did that, the way that you procured your visions of naked people, was to get the TV Guide and like search for the movies that came on after like 1 o'clock in the morning, with the little parenthetical that would come out, and it would say, well, this movie has A for adult situations, language, okay, whatever, violence, fine, and N. You're looking for the N, or the SC, which was sexual content, which was like
the strong sexual content.
Yes, strong sexual content, and adult situations usually meant something like that. And you were looking, especially if you had cable, in the guide, like, because they didn't call it out quite as much in the TV Guide, but definitely in like the little HBO pamphlet.
Yes,
that's
right.
Or like later on in the 90s, they had that weird channel, which was like essentially the TV Guide channel, which would show you everything that was on the cable channels, and they would have like the content in little rectangles, whatever the hell that was called.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was literally how.
It's called the TV Guide channel.
I mean, so people just don't understand how much the world has changed, and
well, we now live in the digital age. So you're talking about the broad humor kind of putting off. I got to say one thing that made me really happy in this movie. So like giddily happy, in fact. And I'm wondering if you did not care for it when he puts on the ice cream uniform again.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that as his like. Now it's time to take care of business. The ice cream man is back. Like
I like that stuff. I did like
cool.
that very much. Yes.
He's got his 4-barrel shotgun back, like, and he makes note of that.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is it's not a totally lost cause. I know Jamie disagrees, but like, there's bits where when it sells it, you're like, okay, this is Phantasm I love, but it's in amongst this just random like stuff that's happening. So many time tuners and
you could get rid of so much of it.
What now?
I said you could get rid of so much of everything.
Oh no. Yeah. It's kind of like if you could distill it down to like a 30-minute Phantasm 5's coming soon. Here's a little bit to wet your whistle, and that would be a fine
short
movie. Yeah.
Well, I just like they added all this extra plot that didn't go anywhere. Like it was just.
Thing, though. I feel like some of the best stuff in this movie is deleted scenes from the first movie. Like I love that scene.
That's totally true.
I love the whole scene that I don't know what it was meant to have in the context of the original movie, but when Mike as a little boy back in the 70s tricks the tall man and hangs him, and the tall man tells him, "Oh, if you let me down, I'll go away forever." And they have this conversation, and it's such a good example of like they actually write Mike as like a little kid with like little kid logic, and it's like, he'll say you'll go away forever, and he buys into that, with that little kid logic. And I
didn't understand that scene. You think that's supposed to, I mean, I know obviously it takes place in the 70s because it was a deleted scene from the first movie, but I feel like I thought that was supposed to be like a flashback. Like, I feel like a lot of this movie comes, I thought so. That's what I took it as.
Well, who knows?
Because it doesn't say.
The series, though, who knows if that ever actually happened.
Right, and exactly. And where... I don't think it did happen either, and I think maybe that's kind of like a throwback to the mental illness-esque facade of the metaphor of the first one. But at the same point, like, when would Mike have gone to the desert? Like, he's hanging in like the same type of tree then. Like, it didn't make sense, and not that a lot in this movie does, but it just seems so.
I just like that scene, if you could cut that out of the rest of the movie, and if it was just like a vignette between those two characters, I just like that scene. I understand that within the larger piece of the movie, it doesn't really work so great.
My favorite part of like the deleted scene stuff, though, I would have to say, as the deleted from the first movie and then put into this one, is when Mike and Reggie. I don't know if it's like their first time hanging out together, but Reggie's driving the ice cream truck. Mike jumps on the back of it, steals an ice cream out of the back, and it's like, Reggie has that like smile, like, oh, rascally kid. But like, it was like a loving memory. That was like my favorite part of like all the flashbacks.
That was really nice, and that really did seem to be a flashback. But I thought the thing about the hanging was more like it was just in some sort of other when. It was like they could walk into, all right, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to see if it makes any sense. It was more like somehow Mike and the tall man got zapped out of their present bodies and were running around in this alternate plane where they were occupying old bodies, and in something that in a dream space that looked like the 70s.
Jason, that makes about as much sense as anything in Phantasm.
I'm just saying that was how I took it. I realized
I think that's perfectly valid within the context of this series.
But you know what? let's say that we were trying to make this movie make some sense, you would need at least one character to explain what the hell is going on. I mean, at least in the first movie, they introduce only a couple concepts, and they have somebody give a basic explanation for each. Oh, he's capping our friends and shrinking them down. That is, they tell us that, he's got another world where he's sending them to do a lot of work. They give you that. This one has so many very creative ideas that it's just given up on the notion of explaining. Because I also point this out. Can you imagine trying to watch this movie having not seen any other Phantasm movies?
Oh, my Lord.
That would be a head-scratching affair. It's already a head-scratching affair. It would be really like, I saw, again, you would think that you fell asleep. And you're like, so I saw this movie, and then this guy was in a hearse, and he went out in the desert, and he hung himself, but he was part of a time travel thing, and there were some spheres, and then this other guy had a swarm of spheres, and he had a shotgun. He dressed up as an ice cream man, but there was another bit about him being an ice cream man in the past. And then the old guy was a good guy, but then he went through this thing, and he came out as a bad guy, and that guy's chasing the guy who's hanging around. And you would tell this story, and people would be like, did you eat, like, sausage, like jalapeno sausage that night? Like, was there...
No, man.
Like, what were you on? Exactly.
Vitamin A,
shrooms,
vitamin
right?
D,
like,
vitamin L, S, D.
Yeah, well, you were on shrooms, right? Like, when you didn't really see this movie. The TV wasn't on, right? And you would try to explain that if nobody else had seen this. And that's how that whole conversation would go.
Yeah.
But as a fan, you're just left like, why doesn't this all come together the way
And yet they try, because they even bring back the psychic lady from the first one, which I applaud.
It's all laudable. It's just...
I was amazed that she was still alive, actually. Like, she looks pretty old in the first one.
Yeah. She looks pretty much the same here. As you get older, 20 years doesn't make as much of a difference. That's the other awesome, strange thing about aging. But, I don't know. The other explanation, I mean, I went to watch I saw Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, and I was able to follow it. But, same thing. It would have been impossible to watch Mockingjay Part 2 without having any of the other movies. This movie doesn't stand
I saw
on
The
its own.
Matrix out of sequence. I saw the third one first. And,
did that make any sense?
Yeah, which everyone was always like, that's a terrible movie. Or, actually, I'm sorry, I should say, I went 2, 3, 1. And, the third one's supposed to be terrible. It made me cry. I had this whole plot, conceived that was not there, that I had just kind of created this whole underlying storyline to fill in the gap. So I'm sure someone would probably do that with this movie as well. I mean, if you just came into it watching Phantasm 5, especially with, their little introduction that they have to do in the beginning, like you just missed last season. It's been a season of TV and you haven't watched the show since last season. So let's give you a quick little rundown of what's going on. And they have that little
they try
thing in there. Yeah.
This really
is
honestly,
too much.
This is an example of, I've been a great defender of films like Buckaroo Banzai, where you get the impression that any direction you turn, the movie could keep going in that direction, and there's plenty of story there. And there never were any sequels, but I mean, in this one, you've got probably even more ideas than that, and they really, honestly, they need to be stripping some of them out. They need to tell a very straight story. They need to also tighten up where the beginning is over and you're moving into the middle, and they need a midpoint, and then they need a turn to part 3. This movie is very sludgy, and you can never quite tell, am I close to the beginning? Am I close to the end? Am I somewhere in the middle? You just don't know, and that's a disservice, because it puts us very ill at ease, and not in a good horror movie way, but in a, am I watching a bad movie kind of way. I mean, Tony, one explanation for the stuff that you said, this movie's so strange, and then this guy was doing this, and then he was in a totally different place, that's something also that happens with just low-budget movies where they don't make enough story, or they make too much.
Or, alternatively, and again, maybe it's just me just wanting this movie to be better,
Well, like
when you cut the budget in the way that this is cut, right?
Yeah.
You make sacrifices, and maybe you try to, what you sacrifice ends up not gelling. Like, well, we have to cut this scene. Like, we'd expect her to do this. We can't do that. And those are the bits that, just don't make it. Another one was Dylan Dog. Like, I really like that movie, and I like the graphic novel a lot. Or novels. It's a series. That I remember the director saying that he got on a plane, and as he was flying to location, he gets this message. I can't remember if it was a quarter or half the budget, basically.
Oh, dear.
They're like, hey, so you're starting to film tomorrow. You're on your way. You don't have the budget anymore. Here's what you have. And it's just like, well, damn, like I made all these plans. Like, this scene had to have these effects and this film and stuff. And so I wonder if, that's part of it. Because, again, I don't want to believe, like I've seen other movies written and produced by, this team. So what made this one this way? And I think that's what's
I think someone should have gone in and rewrote some spots. I mean, like I said, it just seems like they try to do too much plot with not enough budget. I mean, it just kind of harks that over and over again. Like, why didn't they just simplify, It's like certain things, like, they wasted that money on the Jawas in the desert, Mike having to move the boulders with his mind. What did that prove? Like, what did that make? Why did that make this movie better? Because we know that he's got mental power. Like he's what's that called?
Yeah, that he might be the future Tall Man is the impression I get. That the possibility is that if he would just come over to the Tall Man side, he could become the new Tall Man, I guess.
Well, they even have like the dream sequence that Reggie has where we see Mike kind of
looking like
as the Tall Man. In like the suit, and they've shot him in such a way that he looks elongated.
Which is a way to replace Angus Scrim, who is no spring chicken. And so you could have the character continue. You could have Reggie hooking up with young, and I don't mean in a sexual way because that never seems to work out, but hooking up with young teammates for years to come, and they could be chased by Tall Man 2, who would be played by A. Michael Baldwin. Simple as that. And who knows if this guy Coscarelli is always laying all of these tracks for like different stuff that he could do, and you just have no idea.
I think the thing that they wanted to have like this sort of ambiguous ending, and I think the thing that if I could have forgiven a lot more of this movie if they had just had like the stinger endings the way that the rest of these movies are set up, where they have the Tall Man appear to be defeated and then show back up. Instead, we have the Tall Man remove the sphere in Mike's head, and then Reggie go into the portal after him, and the movie just kind of.
And that's to be continued. I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
basically.
Except that they never got to make. They never got to make the. Well, I mean, I guess they did now, but they never really got to make. And the sequel, because so much time has passed, I'm sure Ravager will not be what they had
I don't think it'll tie
initially
into the storyline at all.
Well, originally Ravager or Phantasm 5 had a whole crazy thing that they talked about where there were people with bags over their heads, and the heads would explode, and the exploding heads would cause this other virus that would cause more people's heads to explode. This whole thing I saw where they were like, hey, and here's the thing that's going to happen. We got this writer, and he's got all this, which I actually think that movie became another movie, if I'm not mistaken. But early on, there was going to be a whole, and I was like, I'm sitting there like, I guess that's kind of weird and different. I don't know how that's Phantasm, but it was this whole thing that was like, and we're kind of excited because it's a new crazy thing. And I remember specifically going, I guess this is weird. It's kind of interesting. I don't know where this is going, but hey, you're making another Phantasm.
I remember reading
go
in Fangoria that they were going to have Bruce Campbell in the next one, and I remember at the time being really excited about that, and now I'm thinking having Reggie and Bruce Campbell in the same movie would almost be too much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, it would just feel wrong. I mean, Reggie's the star of Phantasm. So having Bruce Campbell, Ash show up, that just doesn't. I don't know. That would.
I mean,
that
in
would feel
some
wrong.
ways, that's like your horror movie hero team up. You know, fanboy wish. Like you want to see those two characters team up, and you know, it'd make a great comic
Reggie and
book.
Ash would be okay. Yeah, I guess that's.
It'd be a great comic book. Like if they could do like the comic book crossover where Ash teams up with Reggie to fight. I don't know.
One of the great things about this being an independent horror film, even when it's studio, one of the great side effects of it being low budget is that they can dare to have the original cast. That's brilliant. I mean, that's kind of neat because even if the movie sucks, you have this nice feeling about seeing these same guys keep coming back. That forgives a lot. I mean, I'll put up with a lot if I get to see the same people over and over again.
Well, Reggie's a very likable character. I mean, he's flawed. He's kind of, you know, as Jamie pointed out in the next one, he's kind of a lech, but
yeah,
he's likable. He's likable. You know, he's. I think the fact that he's kind of a doofus and he's unlucky in love is kind of part of his.
And we've never seen a dark side to that stuff. We've never seen him like be a stalker. Jamie, actually, can you answer a question about this as an expert in that you're the only one here who's a female? No, but seriously, this is actually a question that I agree with Drew, and I think Hollywood agrees with Drew, that this guy who hits on all the women and is a doofus in that way and is always staring at their breasts and always trying to get them to have sex with them, he's played as funny. We're supposed to understand him as funny. Is this funny? Do women watch this character and go, oh, I love this guy, he's so funny? Or does it make women just go, oh, I've had enough of these characters?
It's kind of somewhere in between. I would say somewhere in between because I like Reggie, but Reggie's like, in my it would be like, Reggie's like the friend that you know you would never hook up with, who's like friend zoned completely, but yet still makes lewd comments and still tries to like catch the occasional grope. Like you're like, geez, you're such a perv. Like that's what makes you so makes you unlikable in that way, you know. And it maybe if he didn't try so hard, there would be a little bit more of an appeal. But because of, like I said, he has like he's got that lecherous, like, just, I don't know, grossness about him that he's like pervy, like it's like sleazy. It's not like, I'm interested in you, like I could fall in love with you, like let's talk, and you know, and that's, you know, not, that doesn't have to be that way for everybody, but Reggie's not exactly like exuding like sex appeal. So, you know,
so
my recommendation for anyone who doesn't seem to be like, you know, chock full of that type of, you know, charisma is to get to know someone first, because anyone comes off as being more attractive because of that. And I think in the movie, I guess because I've seen him in 1 and 2, where he starts off as one, he's like just a good guy, you know, he's got his girlfriend and, you know, who's Mike's babysitter, and, you know, she doesn't really last, but, and by number 2, he loses his family, his wife and his kid, and you feel for him. You're like, oh, this isn't some pervy guy. Like, this is a nice guy. He's a family man. He's, you know, he loved his wife. And then, but by the end of that movie, you're like, well, he seemed, yeah, I know, and you had said it too. You're like, he did seem to get over his wife pretty fast. But I mean, I guess you're supposed to feel like there's been a lapse in time, you know, it's supposed to be a couple years have gone by, but then by 3 he's like trying to hook up with, you know, other
Rocky.
people, and yeah.
We're
And
hooking up with anyone who's attractive who's out there.
Right.
Because
it seems like, and that's the thing, like, I feel like they keep alluding to the fact that it's like post-apocalyptic, that maybe Reggie's like the last man on Earth, and it's almost like that joke, like where people, they're like, I wouldn't sleep with you if you're the last man on Earth, and he's like, well, maybe I am, But at the same point,
I think in his world he's very close to it, because I think he rides these back roads. He's the wayward son, just like Drew was saying, and there ain't nobody out there but monsters and occasional hot women and Reggie Bannister, and he still can't seem to get
what
lucky.
a picture. I think the fact. Here's the thing to me, and Jamie, you can correct me, and you may very well go, no, that's not how it is at all, and I respect that. He's a neutered Lech to me. Like, he's completely played for the fact that he doesn't actually have any game. So I feel like that, because, and maybe that's why maybe I'm too forgiving on it, but he's completely played as almost as far as that goes, almost as a pathetic
well, it's
figure.
almost cartoon-esque. Like, it reminds me of like the Looney Tunes character where they see like a full figure. Yeah, like what?
Like he's like Pepe Le Pew.
Oh yeah. Like suddenly, like he sees some boobs in his eyes like bug out of his head, and the heart's pumping, and you see everything, and it's just like he's salivating, and it's just, like I said,
you're saying
it just
that
comes
Reggie
off
is a
as
Texas
gross.
cartoon. That's hilarious.
Pretty much.
So
yeah.
okay, well, I mean, I'm just saying that as a writer, as we go through, we try to decide, hey, what?
I was going to say, I think they should have just not blown up the one and only girl's car from this movie, and just hired an extra writer.
Yeah. No, you're right. They
should have used that money to have a access to a mausoleum for a couple of more days, because I feel like that's the other thing that this movie is severely lacking, is the atmosphere that the other movies have with all they try to evoke it with like occasional scenes in like cemeteries and in their hearth, but the other movies have this sort of almost fetishized look at the funeral business, and this movie doesn't have that nearly enough.
No, you're right. This movie's forgotten all about that stuff. It's so busy with all this origin business and whatever else is going on, all the Dark Tower stuff of basically following the Dark Man into the desert and all that stuff, that they've gotten away from the original thing, which is what a strange nightmare is death. And yeah, I mean, and that's once again one of the problems with horror series, is that your original film stands alone as this very interesting sort of exploration of whatever it is that you're going to explore. Again, Suspiria. But just think about it. If there were Suspiria 2, it would have to get a lot less dreamy, and suddenly, hey, that witch who takes over ballet
the best
studios
example of
back.
this is Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It becomes more concrete. Or as we've cited 1,000 times, Joseph Campbell talked about concretizing the myth, where the idea at first is one that you don't explain very well, but by the time you're 20 years in, Superman's powers happen because of the sun, and he can pick up things because of telekinesis that he doesn't know about, so he thinks he has to touch stuff and whatever, and you've lost sight of the magic that was there at the beginning. And that happens time and time again with horror series. I don't know.
I didn't understand this at the very end, too. I know we're getting to the end of our talk.
We're going to definitely get to our endorsements pretty soon here.
But I didn't understand why. Okay, so at the very end, they're trying to, Mike's brother and the tall men are trying to cut into his head. They're holding him down, and he manages to slip away, right? And he has his little tuning fork, and he hits it, and everything stops. Like a tall man, like, pauses. Why doesn't he, and like, he does it twice, right? and like where he hits it, why doesn't he just keep adding it? Like, I just don't understand. Like, he
Really
does it
good
twice,
point.
and then the tall man's like, once he comes out of it, he, telekinetically, like, rips it out of Mike's hand and puts it in his pocket. Like, but why not just keep going? Like, that would have been the time. Pick up the saw, disembody that tall man, like, go after him when he's not moving, figure something out then. That really bothered me. I don't know
why.
why.
Well, he now
but it
knows that
did.
there's a ball in his head. Why not, like, find a way to contain the head?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's, what they're doing is they're slowly adding more things to stuff we already know. I mean, so for instance, the tuning fork before reminded Reggie about the notion that there was resonance in these portals that he could interrupt by stopping them from vibrating. Now we've discovered that the portals can do more than go back and forth between dimensions. They can also go back and forth through time. Okay, and with his tuning fork, we've now discovered that the tuning fork can do more than remind him of the existence of resonance. It can also act as a weapon in itself. And if we kept going, eventually everything would have more powers. I don't even know if I'm complaining about this, but you're right. Now that we've discovered it's a weapon,
it's how you use it, because, like, I think the third movie, what it did well is it built on the first two movies.
Yeah.
And tried to be a hybrid of the two. And it did it successfully, whereas this movie, honestly, is probably the most like the first movie in some ways, but it's, like, unsuccessfully doing the stuff from the first movie, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I guess you're right, but the difficulty is that the first movie begins at a familiar place, which is people living at home dealing with grief, which doesn't happen to us every day, but it's something that happens to everybody. This movie begins with our heroes having battled with an immortal being and riding the back roads. We're just starting.
Well, and Reggie and Mike are now officially superheroes.
Yeah. So I mean, it just doesn't have that. You can't connect with it in the way that you could connect with the original, which is why a lot of people just don't like to do sequels. They just like to keep doing new stuff. And
for what it's worth, like, I think the first two sequels are worthy. I don't think this one is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
so by the way, because I just got interested in tidbits and trivia again. So the person working on with Coscarelli on the Phantasm that didn't get made, Phantasm 1999 or Phantasm's End, was Roger Avery. So.
Oh, wow.
The guy who wrote Pulp Fiction, right?
Yeah. And then, a bunch of other, stuff.
That's fantastic.
Pulp Fiction, Beowulf, Silent Hill he wrote. So that would have been a really interesting, like I said, it was there's a lot of weird premises in that, but, a huge budget film with, Avery working with Coscarelli, working with this cast. I mean, it would have been cool if that could have happened. I don't know. I guess maybe they were hoping, like, well, okay, this one will bring it back around.
Yeah.
It's a shame that it didn't happen, but I'd forgotten that he was attached to that because, like I said, I remember when they were talking about it. I was like, I don't know how this is going to work, but since I love Phantasm, of course I would have been along for the ride,
Yeah.
But yeah, what a weird. It would have been interesting. I would have liked to read that. I'd like to read that script. That would have been pretty cool.
Well, like I said, I still really want to read the novel from the original Phantasm.
Man, yeah. So I guess that's rare. Like
Kindle. I don't understand why they haven't. So. Actually, you just posted, Tony, didn't you? And this might, if you had this as your endorsement, I apologize, but you just posted that they're going to be showing the refurbished Phantasm.
South by Southwest, they're going to be showing it. So
I
hope it gets
at least
some kind of. I hope it gets at least some kind of limited release. And yes, I definitely want to. If they could re-release that novel, that'd be cool. So is it rare enough? Like it goes for crazy prices? I haven't checked yet. Is that?
Yeah.
What happens?
They're very rare, and so yeah, they do go for crazy prices. But like I say, they could release it on Kindle, and they would make real money for it. Because all those crazy prices, that's because it's out of print and it's being traded around by collectors. So anyway, we should do our endorsements for this. Well, we should first get our final thoughts before we do endorsements, because we'll be back next week with a different movie still in the Coscarelli series. But this is probably it for Phantasm until it's time to talk about the next one, which I have great faith will actually be coming out soon. So, Tony, final thoughts, Phantasm 4, and if you want to say anything about the whole series, go crazy.
It's a really confusing movie, and again, it's even more confusing because I really like everyone involved in this. It just doesn't gel. Like, it doesn't congeal. It's all over the map. And the bits, to me, there's still great bits in it. I'm not sure what happened. And maybe my disappointment. It ends up being worse. Like I said, I watched it twice just this time, and I still, like, the next day I was like, man, I gotta go back and watch that, because did this happen and then this? I love the bits that basically end up being deleted scenes. Like, again, Jamie brought up the great one where, the ice cream truck, and he gets on, and, like, it's such, and also that's kind of that time, like, of the 70s. It goes back to that time capsule kind of feel. And, I wish that as of now our retrospective ended up on a higher note. But, hopefully 5, we'll see how that turns out. I don't know. There's some epic scenes, and there's some stuff I'm really kind of hoping gets tweaked a bit from the footage I've seen. We'll, I guess we'll reconvene whenever it comes out, and we'll talk about it. But, yeah.
Absolutely.
But, overall, I wish it was better, but we have what we have,
Right. Very cool. All right. Jamie, what are your final thoughts?
I feel like if you were going to watch these movies, I would say stop at 3. Don't even bother. I feel like this one, like, unless you're, like, hardcore, really super into the whole Phantasm series, and you love every minute of it, and you want to see some, like, interesting old footage, that's all that that's really all you're going to get out of this movie. You don't really get any real, like, insight as to what makes the tall man tick. You don't really you don't get to see what happens to the characters from the other movies, except for, Mike pretty much dying. But how many times has Mike died? It's and that's something that you never, like, most of the stuff from the other movies, contradict themselves anyways. But this one really just, I don't know, just takes the whole plot line and kind of just, I don't know. I feel like they needed to go back and rewatch their own movies. Like, had it been 10 years since they had seen the last one, it was, I don't know. I just kind of felt like it was
a fair question. It's a totally fair question. Yeah. So very good. Okay.
It's just, not my cup of tea.
Drew, what do you got to say?
Again, I feel like I was a little more forgiving this time because I know there's another one coming out, because this is only the second time I've seen this one, and I was really pissed off the first time I saw this, just infuriated. Now I have a little bit of more of a nuanced look at it. Like, I enjoy seeing the unused footage from the other movies kind of integrated into this movie, but it is by no means a good capper to the series. I kind of think if you're just wanting to watch the movies as pure entertainment, like, Jamie's on to something by saying you can stop it at 3, because, really this one doesn't really add a whole lot. That being said, I am glad that we've gone through and dissected this whole series, because this has been fun, and a good look at what is arguably horror's weirdest franchise. I mean, like I asked this of our Facebook fans the other day if they could come up with something. Not many people responded, so I'm going to take that as no, people can't really think of something that's as weird as Phantasm. There was a few good choices, but like I said, I've just taken a real delight at revisiting these movies because it's been a while since I've seen the first three, and it's literally been a decade or more since I've seen this one. So it's just been interesting to look at all of these.
Yeah. I agree. It has been really. I'm even glad that I watched this one, despite the fact that this is not a very good movie, and it feels more like a weird addendum or in between chapter that's supposed to go, before the final one. There's so many great ideas in it. It does feel it feels very disjointed, like there's just way too much, and you never know exactly what's going on. But, there's a lot of beautiful stuff in here. I agree with you. Phantasm is like the weirdest series, because any other series you can think of, might be grodier or might include more gore, might include more of one thing or another. But this movie is quite consistently very strange. I mean, this series.
Oh, and never has a horror franchise been more committed to confusing the hell out of its fans.
Yeah. Well, I have no idea if it's trying to be confusing. I think that's funny, but I don't know if I agree with that idea that it's committed to being confusing. But I think it is.
Well, it certainly is.
Really,
though.
You think it's committed to being confusing?
It's certainly confusing. I don't know if it's meant. You may be right. It might not meant to be, but it certainly is.
I think what they have in mind. So you're right that maybe that is. But I think regardless, what they really want to do is just keep telling this increasingly weird story with familiar characters and just dare against the system to be independent. And that means sometimes they kind of fail. That's okay. But, and I think to that extent, as a big sort of independent vision, that kind of succeeds. So, I'm sure as hell glad I watched it. I'll definitely watch the next one, and I would much rather be greatly disappointed in in Phantasm 4 than be bored by some movie that checks all the boxes on the Save the Cat outline and perfectly does it, but is just sort of predictable and dull. I mean, I'll watch this anytime over that kind of stuff. So for me, not a good movie, but the overall series is a great success, and I still think the first one is just one of the finest independent horror films ever. So yeah, all right. Let's get to
Did
our
Tony give his final thoughts?
Yeah. Yes, we started with Tony because he brought
it's really been that long of a day. I apologize.
because
it's the effect this movie has on you.
It's the tall man at work. Oh no!
Way to go, Drew.
It's a great evolution. All right, Tony, what are your endorsements? What do you got going on? What do you want us to see?
Oh man. So if it's playing in your theater, totally not horror, but really awesome, the animated movie Boy and the Beast. Beautiful, awesome. Anybody I've told who has seen it this week, it's showing here. I need to see it again. I saw it at Fantastic Fest. It's amazing. Same team that did Summer Wars, if I'm not mistaken. Summer Wars is awesome. Definitely worth your time. Boy and the Beast. It's getting a limited run, but if it is showing at a theater near you, I also posted, like we said, that Phantasm Restoration is being shown at South by Southwest. If you're in town for that, you should see it. Hopefully it'll get at least a limited theatrical run. I'll definitely be picking up the Blu-ray. It looks amazing. I'm guessing, if I had to go out on a limb, I'm guessing they'll also show some Phantasm 5 stuff, because they usually do that when they do South by screenings. So see how that goes. Unfortunately, I can't be there, but I'm going to endorse that. I can't think of anything else right now. It's kind of a blur. These past few weeks have been busy. Not as busy as before, but yeah, I'm going to go with those. Sea Boy and the Beast, it's beautiful, fantastic film. Definitely check it out if you can. Seems like there was something else, but now I can't remember. If I remember it, I'll post it on the Facebook page. Also, I found out there's a Phantasm book I had no idea about that's like an unauthorized companion to Phantasm that I just dug up when I was looking up other stuff. So we should post that as well.
It's Phantasm Exhumed or something, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we'll post that because, hey, and, I would endorse, if anybody ever does listen to this that has any kind of power, please re-release the Phantasm novel so we can read it. Because I love novelizations of movies. It's one of those things. There's two I need to pick up. Like, I know there was one for Pacific Rim that I need to pick up, and there was another one recently, and I just kicked myself for not having picked those up yet. I can't remember offhand, or else I would endorse that as well. But
I should mention that in the chat room, Darren points out, yes, the book is called Exhumed. So
yeah. So anyway, those are mine.
Fantastic. Jamie, what do you got to endorse for us this week?
Well, I've been all about season 3 of Louis, Louis C.K.'s show, and usually I find it actually very depressing, even though it's a comedy. I mean, it's kind of along the lines of a dramedy, but just because he's got such a dark sense of humor and a lot of it is so self-deprecating and whatnot that you kind of just you feel bad for him, But this season, there's still some of that, but I don't know. I think the writing is set a lot better on this season, and I was really taken with the first episode of the new season, and it was kind of a little bit of a take on size acceptance and the way women are viewed. So on this International Women's Day, it would be not that that's a show it's all about women, but that particular episode I found to be very interesting. So
very cool. All right, excellent. Mr. Drew, do you have anything to endorse?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, you. Yes. Well, South by Southwest is now looming on our fair city of Austin, which means many things, but most importantly, it means it is time. It is time for Punk versus Rockabilly 6. Yes, 6 years I've now been doing this. We've got a really good lineup again this year. So round 1 is the Phantom Shakers versus Hans Gruber and the Diehards, which is their very, very good female-fronted roots rock group versus a really, really aggressive pop-punk band. Round 2 is our very own Jamie Barr and her girl gang of Danger Cakes versus the Horror Punks and the Rebel Flesh. And round 3 is, again, female. Women are very well represented, which I guess is appropriate. This is International Women's Day. Round 3 is Ruby D and the Snake Handlers versus Knockin' Bones, which were recently interviewed in the Austin Chronicle. This is at Flamingo Cantina. It's going to be Sunday, March 13th. Starts at 6 o'clock. There is no cover. You don't need a badge. All you need to do is show up and get ready to rock out. It's literally every year one of the best times I have all year. It's so much fun. It gets really crowded. It gets rowdy, but in a good way, not in a nasty way. And just ends up being, by the end of the night, just a really big party. In fact, I always keep joking that I just need to change the name of the show to Punk Loves Rockabilly. But I'm really looking forward to this.
That sounds like a good show. That sounds really cool.
Man, yeah. I found old footage, like, that we'd put up Picari Shred at that, and I was really I missed it because that was a really good show, and it was super fun.
That was such a good time. I wish that band was still around. That was a great. I loved seeing you play with them.
It was hella fun. It was lightning in a bottle, like, but it was really fun, and the only cover band I guess I could be in. Like, that was such a weird, like, what a strange cover band. Japanese,
but
for bands
absolutely
out
perfect
there
for you.
J-rock, like
it was anime, right?
Yeah, no, well, not all of it. It was basically just Japanese rock. Probably half our set was like anime stuff, but for that we learned a punk set. We ended up actually using that punk set to play, I think, what ended up being our last gig during South by. But we incorporated a bunch of the punk stuff we did, like we learned some Guitar Wolf and some other stuff, and we even had a friend tell us that our version of Guitar
Wolf as well.
What?
Didn't you all do some Balzac as well?
Oh yeah, we did Balzac and we did Gizm. Yeah, and Maximum the Hormone, which isn't punk at all, but man, I love playing their stuff. Yeah, that was that was a good time though. Like I said, I saw footage recently again and was like, oh man,
you should post that
awesome.
You should have posted that on the
Facebook page.
Facebook group. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I will do that. I'll find it again.
Excellent. I have two quick endorsements. One, I'm reading Room, the novel by Emma Donoghue that the movie new movie Room is based on, and it's a harrowing novel, and it's really well written. And one thing that I didn't expect from seeing the trailers is that the book is written from the perspective of the 5-year-old, which is brilliant. The language is cool. It's just very clever and very scary, and sometimes disturbing. Great book. So I'm really enjoying it. I wish I were done. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. Also, I saw No Escape, which has been released on DVD. This is the movie where Owen Wilson is running for his life from a coup in an unnamed Asian country. It's very interesting because it's the most casually racist film I've ever seen, and it's an exercise in just sheer terror because it's Owen Wilson and his family just literally trying to escape a country where they don't speak the language, and it's unusual. It is definitely a skillful piece of work, but it's awfully complex. So and by that I mean my emotions about it and my feelings about whether it's a moral piece of work are complex. So that makes it worth watching. All right. And that takes us to the end of our discussion of Phantasm 4. I am really thankful that you guys have been sticking around. We're getting more and more listeners every week as we go through this. Come to the Facebook page. Let us know if you've enjoyed this and what your thoughts are and whether you disagree with all of us or whether Phantasm 4 is a misunderstood masterpiece. Leave reviews on iTunes.
I would love to hear from somebody who this is their favorite Phantasm movie. I want somebody to tell me why this is their favorite Phantasm movie.
Yeah, I would love to hear that, and we will not mock you either because I'm legitimately interested. Yeah, we all have some controversial ideas. So, thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you next week with a special bonus episode of this Phantasm Don Coscarelli series. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Later.
Night.